Hiroshima stops existing at 8:15 a.m., but 500 miles away in Tokyo, they have no idea. The telephone lines go dead first, then the radio stations, then the military bases. One by one, every connection to the city simply ends. The generals in Tokyo receive fragments of reports that don't make sense. A single plane, a flash of light, then nothing. 3 men in that room will argue about what happened. One thinks it's equipment failure, one thinks it's Allied propaganda, and one, a physicist who has studied atomic theory, realizes they're facing something that could end Japan entirely. What they say next, and whether they say it in time, will determine if millions more will die. But first, they must do the impossible, accept that a city of 350,000 people has been erased in an instant. Before we dive into this story, kindly tell us in the comment where you are watching from and subscribe for more stories like this. August 6th, 1945, morning, Tokyo. A telephone rings in the underground headquarters. The duty officer lifts the receiver, listens, and his face goes pale. Hiroshima isn't responding. Not just delayed, completely silent. No telegraph stations, no military circuits, no radio broadcasts. The telephone operators try every line into the city. Every single one is dead. General staff officers gather around the long table, studying maps of the home islands. They've tracked thousands of bombing raids over 4 years, but this report makes no sense. The initial dispatch mentions one thing that keeps appearing again and again. Flash. A blinding white flash that turned morning into noon for an instant. Then Hiroshima went dark. Some scattered reports from railway stations outside the city say everything is burning. Others claim there's nothing left to burn. These reports contradict each other completely. The officers don't know which version is real, but one colonel, Arakawa Nobutoki, is already forming a theory, and what he's thinking terrifies him more than any conventional weapon ever could. The senior officers spread reconnaissance photos across the table. Hiroshima should have 350,000 residents, military headquarters, weapons factories, communication centers. Now, just silence from every single installation. General Staff Operations Officer speaks first. He says communication lines must be severed. Maybe a fuel depot exploded. The other officers want answers. How many bombers were spotted? What ordnance did they carry? What's the damage assessment? The intelligence officer's response stops all conversation. One bomber, possibly one bomb. The entire city went silent immediately after. Nobody speaks. Because this violates everything they know about aerial warfare. You cannot erase a city with a single bomb. The physics don't work. Colonel Arakawa taps his pencil against the table. He calls it impossible, says the Americans must be using some psychological warfare tactic to create panic. But then a new report arrives. This one is different. This one comes from railway signalmen stationed 30 miles outside Hiroshima. What they witnessed made experienced military personnel break protocol and send urgent, unencrypted messages. The report lands on the table. The handwriting shows stress, words crossed out and rewritten. The signalmen describe a massive cloud formation. Not normal smoke, something rising in a column that mushroomed at the top, climbing higher than any cloud they'd ever seen. Below it, where Hiroshima should be visible in the valley, only fire and smoke spreading like a flood across the landscape. The signalmen say they felt a shockwave that knocked them down. The blast wave traveled 30 miles. They saw telephone poles bending, then snapping, windows shattered in their station. The chief of operations reads this report twice. His expression darkens each time. He knows about the theoretical research. Japan has explored atomic fission, limited resources, incomplete results, but he understands the science. If America succeeded in building an atomic weapon first, he doesn't finish that thought aloud, but everyone in the room understands the implication. Every defensive strategy becomes meaningless. Every plan for homeland resistance becomes suicide. Colonel Arakawa still refuses to accept it. He demands direct verification, orders a young officer named Major Sanezumi Kotaro to fly to Hiroshima, immediately land if possible, and report back with facts instead of panic. The major boards a reconnaissance aircraft. Destination Hiroshima. Expected arrival 1 hour, but as the plane approaches the city, something goes wrong. The pilot radios back. The smoke is too thick. They're circling, trying to find a safe approach. Then the radio goes quiet for 3 minutes. When the pilot's voice returns, it sounds hollow. He says they can't land. The airfield is covered in debris, but he flew low over the city center to observe. From the cockpit, looking down, he should see streets, buildings, landmarks. Instead, he saw the outline of rivers and bridges like lines drawn on scorched earth. Almost everything that once stood above ground level is flattened. Major Kotaro returns to Tokyo. He enters the war room. His uniform is clean, but his hands shake. He's carrying handwritten notes, observations from the flight. The senior officers wait for his assessment. 4 words. The city is gone. General Anami, war minister and the most powerful voice for continuing the fight, stares at the report. His jaw tightens. He crumples the paper slightly, then forces himself to smooth it out. He still doesn't want to believe this changes anything. But then the scientist arrives, and what he says next will force them to speak the words they've been avoiding. Yoshio Nishina enters the room, Japan's leading nuclear physicist. He's been studying every report from Hiroshima, the flash pattern, the burn injuries, the scale of destruction, the mushroom cloud formation. He's calculated the numbers, reviewed the testimonies. Now he must tell the high command what they already fear. Quick reminder before we start. Subscribing helps the channel grow and keeps more stories coming your way. Nishina hasn't spoken yet, because before he can deliver his verdict, the room needs to understand how complete the silence from Hiroshima truly is. The telephone operators work through the night. They try every circuit into the city, military lines first, then civilian exchanges, then emergency frequencies reserved for disasters. Every single line returns the same result: static, or worse, nothing at all. Just dead air where a city of 350,000 people should be responding. The radio room reports similar failures. Hiroshima's main broadcasting station went off the air at 8:16 a.m. The backup station never came online. Military radio operators attempt contact with the Army Control Headquarters. They send the signal. They wait. They send again. The radio waves travel into Hiroshima and disappear like messages thrown into a void. One operator, frustrated, slams his hand on the desk. He's been trying for 6 hours. 6 hours of nothing. He tells his supervisor that the equipment must be faulty. The supervisor checks every connection. Everything works perfectly. The problem isn't in Tokyo. The problem is that there's nothing left in Hiroshima to contact. But the senior generals refuse to believe this. They gather in clusters around the war room, offering explanations that make sense in a world where cities don't simply vanish. General Anami speaks loudest. He says the telephone exchange must have been hit. A lucky strike on the central communications hub, that's all. The city is damaged, confused, but it's still there. Someone mutters agreement. Yes, poor discipline among local commanders. They're probably overwhelmed, not reporting properly. Another voice suggests enemy psychological warfare. The Americans want them to think Hiroshima is destroyed. Classic deception. Make Japan believe the situation is hopeless. One colonel nods and says it out loud. The thought everyone wants to believe. Cities don't just vanish because a single bomber passes overhead. But then the reports from surrounding prefectures start arriving. And these reports are harder to dismiss. Military patrols stationed 30 to 40 kilometers outside Hiroshima send observations. They describe fires spreading outward from the city center like a wave, not normal fires. These burn with an intensity that makes no sense for conventional incendiaries. The flames seem to feed on everything, consuming wood, stone, metal. Survivors stagger into these outer stations. Their injuries confuse the medical officers. Burns, but not from fire. The skin looks seared, almost melted in patterns. Some victims have burns only on one side of their body, the side that faced Hiroshima. Others have strange marks, shadows of objects burned into their skin. Then there's the rain. Multiple reports mention it. Black rain. Thick, oily drops that fall from the mushroom cloud and leave dark stains on everything they touch. One patrol officer writes that the rain smells wrong. Chemical, poisonous. The chief of operations reads these reports carefully. He underlines certain phrases. Mushroom cloud, circular destruction. Burns without fire. Each detail points towards something the high command doesn't want to acknowledge. He makes a decision. They need direct observation, Not scattered reports from panicked civilians. They need a trained military officer to fly over Hiroshima and bring back the truth. Major Sanizumi Kotaro receives his orders at noon. Fly to Hiroshima. Land if possible. Inspect the damage. Report back with factual assessment, not rumors or hysteria. The major salutes, confident. He's flown reconnaissance over dozens of bombed cities. Tokyo, Osaka, Kobe. He knows what firebombing looks like. He expects to find the same in Hiroshima. His plane takes off. Flight time approximately 1 hour. The major reviews his notes during the flight. Hiroshima's military installations yield key infrastructure, likely targets. He prepares to document conventional bomb damage. Then the pilot banks the aircraft. And through the window, the major sees something that makes his preparation meaningless. The destruction zone is perfectly circular, not the scattered, chaotic damage pattern of a normal raid. A circle, as if someone drew a compass around the city center and erased everything inside the line. The major estimates the radius. 2 kilometers, maybe more. Everything within that circle is flattened. Above the ruins, a massive column of smoke still rises. Even hours after the blast, it climbs into the sky, spreading at the top into that distinctive mushroom shape. The cloud glows from within. Heat. Still burning, still radiating energy hours later. The pilot attempts to approach the airfield. The major needs to land, needs to inspect the ground. But as they descend, they see the runways destroyed, cratered, covered in debris and bodies. The control tower is a skeleton of twisted metal. The pilot circles lower. Through binoculars, the major observes the streets. He sees people moving. Survivors, but they don't move normally. They stagger. Their skin hangs in strips. Some are burned black. Others wander in circles, clearly blind. They wave at the plane, desperate for help that cannot reach them. The major makes notes. His handwriting gets shakier with each observation. He sees the rivers choked with corpses. He sees the outline of buildings that no longer exist, just foundations and shadows burned into the ground. He sees bridges collapse into the water. He sees fires still burning in pockets across the ruins. The pilot radios Tokyo. Cannot land. Repeat, cannot land. Airfield destroyed. Attempting visual reconnaissance only. They circle for 20 minutes. The major fills 3 pages with observations. Then the pilot says they need to return. Fuel is running low. They climb away from Hiroshima. The major looks back. The mushroom cloud is still visible even as they fly toward Tokyo. He arrives at headquarters as the sun sets. His uniform is clean. His face is pale. He carries his notes into the war room. The senior officers stop their arguments and turn to face him. The major stands at attention. He's supposed to deliver a tactical assessment, numbers, targets, damage estimates. Instead, he opens his notebook and reads one sentence. It is as though a monstrous hand pressed the city into the earth. The room goes completely still. No one moves. No one speaks. Even General Anami, who has been dismissing reports all day, says nothing, because that single sentence describes something beyond conventional warfare, something that doesn't fit into any tactical manual or strategic doctrine. The major continues. He describes the circular destruction, the mushroom cloud, the burns, the black rain. Each detail makes the silence in the room heavier. When he finishes, he closes his notebook. The generals stare at him. They want him to take it back, to say he was mistaken, to offer some rational explanation. But the major just stands there, waiting for orders that nobody knows how to give. The generals have run out of explanations. Damaged telephone exchanges don't create mushroom clouds. Poor discipline doesn't melt skin in patterns. Psychological warfare doesn't erase cities in perfect circles. They need someone who understands physics, not tactics. Someone who can tell them what weapon could do this. Yoshio Nishina receives a summons at his laboratory. Japan's leading nuclear physicist, the man who studied under Niels Bohr in Copenhagen, the quiet head of Japan's own small, struggling atomic research program. He's been following the reports from Hiroshima all day. He already knows what they're going to ask him. And he already knows the answer they don't want to hear. He arrives at headquarters carrying a leather satchel. Inside, notebooks filled with calculations, theoretical models of fission chain reactions, estimates of critical mass. Papers he wrote years ago exploring whether an atomic bomb was even possible. He once believed it was purely theoretical, something that might exist decades in the future. Now he's not so certain. The war room goes quiet when he enters. Senior officers part to let him approach the table. Maps of Hiroshima are spread across the surface. Reconnaissance photos, written reports, sketches the pilot made of the mushroom cloud. Nishina sets down his satchel and begins examining the evidence. He reads the reports describing the flash. Multiple witnesses say it was brighter than the sun, bright enough to burn shadows into concrete, bright enough to blind people who looked directly at it. He makes notes in the margin, consistent with thermal radiation from fission, and he studies the temperature estimates. Survivors describe metal melting, stone cracking from heat, rivers boiling. The blast epicenter reached temperatures found only in furnaces or the sun itself. He underlines a number, several thousand degrees Celsius, possible with nuclear fission. The reconnaissance photos show the circular blast pattern. Nishina measures the radius with a ruler, approximately 2 kilometers from ground zero to the edge of total destruction. He calculates backwards. That requires an explosive force equivalent to roughly 15,000 tons of conventional explosives. No conventional bomb could deliver that yield. The burns interest him most, not thermal burns from fire. These are flash burns, radiation burns. The pattern shows people were injured by the light itself before the shockwave even reached them. Some victims were burned only on the side facing the explosion. Their clothes show the same pattern, scorched on one side, untouched on the other. He examines the pilot's sketch of the mushroom cloud, the distinctive shape, the height, the way it spread at the top as rising heat met cooler air. He's seen this shape before, in theoretical papers, in physics journals discussing what an atomic explosion might look like. The mushroom cloud is a signature, unmistakable. Nishina sets down the last report. The room waits. He hesitates, because what he's about to say will confirm their worst fear. An atomic bomb shouldn't be deployable yet. The Americans shouldn't have solved the engineering problems. The uranium enrichment alone should take years, but the evidence doesn't lie. He speaks softly, almost apologetically. This matches the effects of an atomic explosion. I believe the enemy has successfully deployed such a weapon. The room erupts. Officers lean forward, talking over each other. Some gasp. Others shake their heads in denial. General Anami's voice cuts through the chaos. He calls it guesswork, speculation. He demands proof, real proof, not theories from a laboratory. Nishina opens his notebook. He explains, using terms these military men barely understand. Atomic fission, the splitting of uranium atoms. Each split releases energy and triggers more splits. A chain reaction that happens in microseconds. That's why the flash was so brief. That's why the explosion was instantaneous. The entire reaction completed before anyone could blink. He explains why only one plane was needed. The bomb itself is small, perhaps 3 meters long, maybe 4,000 kilograms. One bomber can carry it easily. But the energy it releases equals 15,000 tons of TNT detonating simultaneously. The physics makes it possible, inevitable even. An officer interrupts. Why couldn't Japan build this weapon? Nishina's answer is blunt. Resources. Japan lacks the industrial capacity, the electrical power, the specialized equipment needed to enrich uranium to weapons grade. America has all of those things. They built entire secret cities just to produce the material. Japan has one small cyclotron and a handful of scientists working in basements. He continues. The destruction was total because the energy release was concentrated in a single instant. No time to take cover. No time to evacuate. The shockwave moved faster than sound. The thermal radiation traveled at the speed of light. One moment, Hiroshima existed. The next moment, it didn't. The implications spread through the room like a shockwave of their own. Officers whisper to each other. Someone mentions Tokyo. Someone else says Osaka, Kyoto, Nagoya. The Americans could drop one bomb on each city, one bomb, one mission, one city erased. Japan's air defenses are meaningless. You can't shoot down every bomber, and even one getting through means total destruction. Colonel Arakawa does the math aloud. Japan has maybe 60 major cities. If America has 60 atomic bombs, Japan ceases to exist as a nation. Even if they only have 10 bombs, that's 10 cities gone. Millions dead. No industrial base, no military headquarters, no government. The silence that follows is different from before. This isn't confusion, this is fear. Raw, strategic fear. They're generals who have planned battles, calculated casualties, accepted losses, but this weapon makes all of that irrelevant. You can't fight an enemy who can erase your cities one by one from the sky. Foreign Minister Togo, who has been listening quietly, finally speaks. He says what everyone is thinking but afraid to say. If this is true, continuing the war becomes national suicide. Every day they fight is another day America can build more bombs. More cities will vanish. Eventually, nothing will remain. General Anami slams his fist on the table. The sound makes several officers flinch. He says they continue fighting. Japan's honor demands it. The soldiers who already died demand it. Surrender is unthinkable. They'll fight in the mountains. They'll bleed the Americans until they negotiate. One atomic bomb doesn't change the fundamental strategy. Togo's response comes out as barely more than a whisper, but in the silence, everyone hears it clearly. Then the nation will vanish as Hiroshima did. Not in battle, not with honor, simply erased, city by city until there's nothing left to defend. The two men stare at each other across the table. Between them lies the question that will define Japan's future. Fight and face annihilation, or surrender and live with shame. The High Command has 3 days to decide, because 500 miles away, another American bomber crew is already preparing their aircraft for a second mission. The Big Six gather the following morning. These 6 men control Japan's fate. Prime Minister Suzuki, elderly and careful with his words. Foreign Minister Togo, who has spent months seeking diplomatic channels to end the war. Navy Minister Yonai, pragmatic and quietly convinced the war is lost. On the other side, War Minister Anami, the Army's most powerful voice. General Umezu, Chief of the Army General Staff. Admiral Toyota, Chief of the Navy General Staff. 3 men who want peace. 3 men who demand continued resistance. The split is perfect. Deadlock begins the moment they sit down. Togo speaks first. He's direct, almost blunt. The atomic bomb changes everything they've planned. Every strategy for homeland defense assumes conventional warfare. Divisions dug into mountains. Civilians armed with bamboo spears. Kamikaze planes sacrificing themselves to stop invasion fleets. All of it becomes meaningless if America can simply fly over and erase entire cities without landing a single soldier. Yonai adds numbers. Japan has roughly 60 major cities. If America has even 20 atomic bombs, that's 20 cities gone. Millions of civilians dead. No industrial capacity, no transportation hubs, no government centers. The homeland defense strategy requires cities to exist, to supply troops, to house civilians, to maintain some functioning society. Atomic bombs remove that foundation entirely. Prime Minister Suzuki speaks carefully. He survived multiple assassination attempts by militarists who consider him too soft. He chooses his words to avoid giving them another reason. He says the emperor's subjects must be protected. If continuing the war means watching Japan's cities vanish one by one, that's not protection. That's extinction. The peace faction makes their case. National survival requires accepting surrender terms now, before more bombs fall, before every major city becomes another Hiroshima. The question isn't whether Japan can win. The question is whether Japan will still exist as a nation if the war continues another month. General Anami listens with his jaw clenched. When they finish, he responds with barely controlled anger. He talks about honor, about sacrifice, about the millions of soldiers and civilians who have already died believing their deaths meant something. Surrender now means telling their families those deaths were pointless, wasted, thrown away. He explains the Ketsugo strategy again, the plan for homeland defense. Yes, atomic bombs are terrible, but America still needs to invade if they want unconditional surrender. And when they invade, Japan will make them pay. Every beach, every mountain, every city street, millions of casualties. American mothers will demand their government negotiate, accept conditional surrender, preserve the emperor, preserve Japan's honor. Umezu supports him. The army remains strong. 2 million men under arms, another 28 million civilians ready to fight. America won't have the stomach for that kind of bloodbath. One atomic bomb, even 2 or 3, doesn't change the fundamental calculation. Japan can still force better terms through resistance. Admiral Toyota nods agreement. The military must not betray the dead. Every soldier who died believed they were protecting Japan's future. Surrender means admitting their sacrifice meant nothing. The entire war becomes meaningless. The nation's honor dies even if the people survive. The arguments cycle: peace faction counters war faction. War faction dismisses peace faction. Hours pass with no movement, no compromise. Each side believes they're fighting for Japan's survival, just in different ways. Then disturbing reports arrive from Hiroshima. Medical teams who entered the city days after the bombing are now falling ill. Symptoms that make no sense. Victims who survived the blast with minor injuries are suddenly dying, vomiting, hair falling out, skin sloughing off in sheets, purple spots appearing on their bodies, internal bleeding that doctors cannot stop. The reports are read aloud. Some generals shift uncomfortably. This doesn't sound like bomb damage. This sounds like something else, something lingering. Poison, maybe, or disease. The doctors in Hiroshima have no explanation. They just watch people who should be recovering suddenly collapse and die. Nishina, called back to explain, speaks quietly. Radiation sickness. The bomb doesn't just explode, it leaves behind invisible contamination, particles that damage cells, destroy bone marrow, kill slowly over days or weeks. Hiroshima isn't just destroyed, it's poisoned. Anyone who enters the city risks exposure. This information disturbs even the hardliners, but they don't change their position. Can't change it. Because changing means admitting the entire war effort was a mistake, means accepting that all those deaths led nowhere. The psychological cost is too high. Navy Minister Yonai tries a different approach. He warns that America likely has more bombs. The resources required to build one atomic bomb are enormous, yes, but America has enormous resources. If they built one, they probably built several, maybe dozens. The next bomb could fall tomorrow, on Tokyo, on Kyoto, on any city in Japan. General Umezu dismisses this immediately. America cannot possibly have more than 1 or 2 atomic bombs. The physics is too complex, the materials too rare. Hiroshima was probably their only bomb. They're bluffing now, hoping Japan surrenders out of fear. Classic psychological warfare. The correct response is to call their bluff and continue fighting. The argument escalates. Voices rise, fists hit the table, but no one changes position. 3 against 3, perfect deadlock. The hours drag toward evening with no resolution. Prime Minister Suzuki knows how deadlocks break. Traditionally, they would seek the emperor's guidance, but invoking the emperor is dangerous. He's supposed to reign, not decide. Asking him to choose sides in a political dispute violates centuries of tradition. And if militarists believe the emperor is being manipulated into surrender, they might revolt, might even harm him. So his name remains unspoken. His potential intervention hangs over the room like a threat neither side wants to trigger. Night falls. The meeting continues under electric lights. Staff officers bring tea, rice, reports from various fronts. The Big Six barely notice. They're locked in a battle more important than any front line. A battle over whether Japan fights to extinction or surrenders while the nation still exists. Then the door opens. A messenger enters running. He's out of breath. His face is pale. He carries a decoded telegram from Southern Command. His hands shake as he presents it to Prime Minister Suzuki. Suzuki reads it. His face goes gray. He looks at the other 5 men. For a moment, he can't speak. Then he manages 4 words that change everything. A second bomb has fallen. The room goes silent. General Umezu, who said America couldn't possibly have more bombs, stares at the message. Admiral Toyota, who argued they were bluffing, closes his eyes. War Minister Anami's fist, raised to make another point, slowly lowers to the table. The city is Nagasaki, another atomic bomb, another city erased, 3 days after Hiroshima. America isn't bluffing. They have more bombs, and they're willing to use them. The details from Nagasaki arrive throughout the night. Each report confirms the pattern. 1 bomber, a B-29 called Box Scar. 1 bomb dropped at 11:02 a.m., a blinding flash, A mushroom cloud rising over the Urakami Valley, then silence from the city. The reconnaissance reports come faster this time. The high command knows what to look for now. The circular blast zone, the thermal burns, the shockwave damage radiating outward. Nagasaki's geography saves some neighborhoods, the surrounding hills containing the blast. But the city center is gone, completely flattened. Tens of thousands dead instantly, more dying from radiation. This time, there's no debate about what happened. No theories about fuel depots or communication failures. The pattern is identical to Hiroshima. America has used a second atomic bomb, which means they have more than one, which means General Umezu was wrong, which means Admiral Toyota was wrong, which means America isn't bluffing. The psychological impact hits harder than the first bomb. Hiroshima was unthinkable. Nagasaki makes it a pattern, a strategy, a promise of what comes next. General Anami asked the question everyone is thinking. How many of these bombs does America have? 3? 10? 50? Can they erase every major city in Japan? Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama. Can they just fly over, drop bombs, and watch the nation disappear city by city? No one has an answer. Nishina admits he doesn't know how many bombs America can produce. Building one required massive industrial effort. But once you solve the technical problems, production becomes easier. They could have a dozen ready. They could have more being built. They could drop one bomb per week until nothing remains. Colonel Arakawa does grim calculations. Japan has 66 cities with populations over 100,000. At one bomb per city, that's 66 missions. Even if air defenses stop half the bombers, that's still 33 cities erased, 30 million people dead, the entire industrial base destroyed, the government dissolved, the nation reduced to scattered rural villages with no way to feed themselves. Admiral Toyota stares at the map of Japan. He traces his finger over the major cities, each one a potential target. Each one could be next. He asks if this is how the nation ends. Not in battle, not with soldiers defending sacred ground. Just civilians vaporized from the sky while the military watches helplessly. Then the second shock arrives. A different messenger, a different telegram. This one from the Kwantung Army in Manchuria. The Soviet Union has declared war. Soviet forces crossed the border overnight. Thousands of tanks. Overwhelming numbers. The Kwantung Army, Japan's most elite force, is collapsing. Entire divisions overrun. Communication lines severed. Commanders reporting they cannot hold. For some officers, this news hits harder than Nagasaki. The Soviets were supposed to be neutral. Japan's diplomats were negotiating with Moscow, hoping the Soviets might mediate peace terms with America. That hope dies in an instant. The Soviets aren't mediating. They're invading. War Minister Anami reads the reports from Manchuria with growing horror. Soviet tank columns rolling across the steppe, Japanese positions bypassed and surrounded, the Kwantung Army retreating in chaos. No fuel for vehicles, no ammunition for sustained defense, officers requesting permission to withdraw, permission that cannot be granted because there's nowhere to withdraw to. The strategic situation becomes clear with brutal simplicity. Japan now faces atomic devastation from the sky and massive ground invasion from the west. America can erase cities without landing a soldier. The Soviets can conquer Manchuria, Korea, potentially invade Hokkaido from the north. Japan has no navy to stop them, no air force to challenge them, no oil reserves to fuel sustained defense, no allies to call for help. The nation is surrounded by enemies with unlimited resources facing a nation with nothing left. Foreign Minister Togo speaks into the silence. He says what the military men cannot. Japan has lost. Not just this battle or that campaign. Everything. The war is over. The only question remaining is whether they accept that reality before or after America drops 10 more atomic bombs and the Soviets occupy half of Japan. General Umezu reacts with fury. He refuses to accept defeat. The homeland remains unconquered. 2 million soldiers still under arms. The Ketsugo strategy can still work. Make the Americans pay such a high price for invasion that they negotiate. The atomic bombs change the tactics, but not the fundamental strategy. But his words sound hollow now, even to him. Because the Ketsugo strategy assumed Japan would fight one enemy on one front. Now they face two enemies on multiple fronts. And one of those enemies has a weapon that makes conventional defense irrelevant. Navy Minister Yonai asks a simple question. How does Ketsugo work when your cities no longer exist? When your civilians are dead or dying from radiation? When Soviet tanks are rolling through Manchuria and American bombers are erasing your industrial base? What exactly are 2 million soldiers going to defend? Ashes? The debate continues, but the energy has drained from it. The war faction still argues for resistance, but their arguments sound desperate, based on hope rather than strategy, based on honor rather than reality. They're not arguing for victory anymore. They're arguing for the right to choose how Japan dies. The peace faction presses their advantage. Every day of continued war means more cities at risk, more civilians dead, more territory lost to the Soviets. The atomic bombs proved America's technological superiority. The Soviet invasion proved Japan's diplomatic isolation. There are no allies coming, no miracle weapons being developed, no strategic reserves to deploy. Only the choice between surrender now or annihilation later. More reports arrive from Manchuria. Soviet mechanized units advancing 50 kilometers per day. Japanese positions overrun before they can organize defense. Officers requesting orders that Tokyo cannot provide. One message stands out. Short, desperate, honest. We cannot stop them. 3 words that summarize Japan's entire strategic position. They cannot stop the atomic bombs. They cannot stop the Soviet advance. They cannot feed their people. They cannot fuel their military. They cannot win. They cannot even fight to a stalemate. They can only choose between surrender and extinction. Prime Minister Suzuki looks around the table. The Big Six remain divided. Anami, Umezu, and Toyota still insist on continued resistance. Togo, Yonai, and himself advocate surrender. 3 against 3. Hours of argument have changed nothing. Nagasaki changed nothing. The Soviet invasion changed nothing. Each side remains convinced they're right. Each side refuses to compromise. But the decision cannot wait. America might drop another bomb tomorrow. The Soviets advance every hour. Japan's cities, Japan's people, Japan's very existence hangs in the balance. Someone must break the deadlock, someone with authority that transcends military rank or political position, someone whose word cannot be questioned or refused. Suzuki speaks slowly, carefully. He knows what he's about to suggest violates tradition. The emperor reigns but does not rule, does not make political decisions, does not choose sides in government debates, but tradition written in normal times cannot account for atomic bombs and national extinction. He looks at each man in turn, then he says the words that change everything. Only the emperor can decide now. The Imperial Conference convenes just before midnight on August 9th, in an underground chamber beneath the Imperial Palace. The air is thick, hot despite the ventilation, or maybe it just feels that way because of what hangs in the balance. All major leaders receive summons. The Big Six, senior advisors, military chiefs, they gather in formal dress, exhausted from days of argument, but standing at rigid attention. Palace protocol demands perfection even as the nation crumbles. No one knows if the emperor will speak. Traditionally, he sits in silence while his advisors debate. He reigns, he does not rule, he does not make decisions, he listens, and his government acts in his name. But tonight, nothing is traditional. 2 cities have vanished. The Soviets are invading. Japan faces extinction. Maybe tradition dies tonight too. Emperor Hirohito enters. Everyone bows deeply. He takes his seat at the head of the chamber. His face reveals nothing. He sits perfectly still while Prime Minister Suzuki opens a session and requests that the council reach a decision on accepting or rejecting the Allied surrender terms. The arguments begin immediately. The same arguments, the same positions, the same deadlock, but now spoken in the emperor's presence, which makes every word heavier, more final. War Minister Anami stands. He argues for continued resistance. Yes, the atomic bombs are terrible. Yes, the Soviet invasion is unexpected, but Japan's honor demands that the nation fight. 2 million soldiers ready to defend the homeland. 28 million civilians willing to sacrifice everything. If Japan surrenders now, every death in this war becomes meaningless. Every soldier who died believing they protected the nation will have died for nothing. The Ketsu-go strategy can still force better terms. Make the Americans negotiate, preserve the emperor's position, preserve Japan's dignity. General Umezu supports him. The military remains strong, the homeland unconquered. Surrender means accepting national humiliation. Occupation. The emperor reduced to a figurehead under foreign control. Better to fight and die as an independent nation than live as America's puppet. Admiral Toyota agrees. The navy may be destroyed, but the army remains. The kamikaze spirit remains. The will to resist remains. Japan can still inflict massive casualties on any invasion force. The Americans will lose patience. Their public will demand negotiation. This is Japan's last chance to secure honorable terms. Foreign Minister Togo counters with cold reality. There will be no invasion because America doesn't need to invade. They'll simply drop atomic bomb until every city is ash. 10 cities, 20 cities, however many it takes. The Ketsu-go strategy assumes conventional warfare. It assumes Americans must land soldiers. Atomic bombs make that assumption obsolete. Japan cannot defend against weapons that erase cities in seconds. Navy Minister Yonai adds more harsh truth. The Soviet invasion eliminates any hope of negotiated peace. Japan's diplomats were counting on Soviet mediation. That option is gone. The Soviets are conquering Manchuria. They'll take Korea next. Maybe invade Hokkaido. Japan now faces two enemies with unlimited resources while Japan has nothing. No oil, no steel, no food reserves, no allies. Only the choice between surrender now or total annihilation. Prime Minister Suzuki speaks carefully. The people must be protected. That is the emperor's highest duty. His subjects. If continuing the war means watching them die by the millions, that's not protection. That's abandonment. Japan can survive surrender. Japan cannot survive 50 atomic bombs. The argument cycle. Round and round. War faction meets peace faction. Each side convinced they're defending Japan's true interests. Each side unwilling to compromise. Hours pass. Midnight becomes early morning. No decision emerges. The deadlock holds. Then Emperor Hirohito rises. The chamber falls silent instantly. Completely. No one breathes. No one moves. Because the emperor standing means he's about to speak. And the emperor speaking means tradition is breaking. The unthinkable is happening. His voice is soft, barely above a whisper, but in the absolute silence, every word carries clearly. I have listened carefully to all the arguments. Both sides present their views sincerely. Both believe they serve Japan's interests, but I must now share my own thoughts. He pauses. No one dares look directly at him. They keep their heads bowed but strain to hear every syllable. The enemy has employed a new and most cruel bomb. Its power to damage is indeed incalculable. If we continue the war, this will lead only to the collapse and obliteration of the Japanese nation. The Japanese people will be utterly destroyed. His voice remained steady, quiet, but the words hit like hammer blows. I cannot bear to see my innocent people suffer any longer. The time has come to bear the unbearable, to endure what cannot be endured. He looks at the men before him, senior generals who have fought for years, who have sent thousands to their deaths, who have believed until this moment that surrender was unthinkable. I have decided that we must accept the Allied terms. We will end this war. Silence follows, long, heavy, unbearable. Then General Anami's shoulders start to shake. He bows deeper, his face hidden, but his body trembles. Is he weeping or struggling to contain rage? No one can tell. No one dares ask. Other generals stare straight ahead. Their expressions blank, carefully controlled, but their eyes show everything: shock, grief, relief, despair, all mixed together in ways that don't make sense but somehow fit this impossible moment. Admiral Toyota closes his eyes, his jaw clenched tight. He wanted to fight. He believed Japan could still bargain. The emperor's words make that belief irrelevant. There is no bargaining with the emperor's direct command. Foreign Minister Togo allows himself one small nod. Victory, but it feels nothing like victory. Just the smallest margin of survival snatched from the jaws of extinction. Prime Minister Suzuki formally records the emperor's decision. Japan will accept the Potsdam Declaration's terms. The war will end. The fighting will stop. Surrender documents will be prepared. The emperor's voice has spoken. The debate is over. The conference adjourns. The men file out in silence, each processing what just happened, each understanding that their world has changed forever. The emperor, who never decides, has decided. The military, which never surrenders, will surrender. Japan, which vowed to fight to the last person, will lay down its arms. Outside the chamber, junior officers wait for news. They see the senior commanders emerging. They see faces that look defeated despite no battle being fought. Word spreads in whispers. Each whisper repeated and passed along until everyone knows. The emperor has chosen peace. The war is over, not because Japan was conquered, not because its armies were destroyed, but because its emperor looked at two destroyed cities, at Soviet armies advancing, at the prospect of national extinction, and made the hardest choice any leader can make. He chose survival over honor, life over death, future over past. In the halls outside, some officers weep. Others stand in shock. A few begin planning their response. Because not everyone will accept this decision. Not everyone can endure the unendurable. Some would rather die than surrender. And in the days ahead, they'll make that choice clear. The hours after the emperor's decision reveal everything. How men respond when their world ends. When everything they believe turns out to be wrong. When the choice between honor and survival gets made for them. The reaction split along predictable lines, yet each man's response carries its own weight, its own private devastation. Some feel relief. Foreign Minister Togo allows himself to breathe fully for the first time in days. The decision he fought for has been made. Japan will survive. The people will survive. Cities will remain standing instead of vanishing one by one. Relief tastes bitter, mixed with grief for those already lost. But it's still relief. Others feel only humiliation. Admiral Toyota sits alone in his office staring at maps of Pacific battles. Every island, every naval engagement, every sacrifice, all leading to this moment of surrender. The shame feels physical, a weight pressing down on his chest. Japan's military, once the terror of Asia, brought low not by superior strategy or braver soldiers, but by a single type of bomb they couldn't defend against. Some feel rage. General Umezu's hands shake as he reviews surrender protocols. Rage at America for building the bomb. Rage at circumstance for forcing this choice. Rage at himself for failing to find another way. The anger has nowhere to go. No enemy to strike. No battle to fight. Just paperwork and defeat. And some feel nothing at all. Numb acceptance. The mind protecting itself by shutting down. Officers who argued for days now sit quietly, processing an incomprehensible reality. Japan has surrendered. The war is over. Nothing will ever be the same. But what did they actually say? When they realized Hiroshima had vanished? When the magnitude of that loss finally broke through their disbelief? General Anami, addressing junior officers who demand continued resistance, speaks with quiet finality. We cannot oppose His Majesty's decision. The Emperor has spoken. There is nothing more to say. Navy Minister Yonai, in a private meeting with staff, reflects on the broader meaning. Hiroshima was the warning. We didn't understand it quickly enough. Now 2 cities are gone, and we must accept what we should have accepted after the first. Yoshio Nishina, the physicist who confirmed their worst fears, writes in his personal journal, "The world has changed forever. Not just Japan. All of humanity now lives in the shadow of weapons that can erase cities in seconds. We have entered a new age, and I fear what comes next." Colonel Arakawa, who first doubted the reports, admits to a colleague, "A single bomb for a single city. I called it impossible. Yet it was true. Everything we knew about warfare became obsolete in a flash of light." But many say nothing at all. They simply bow when given the emperor's orders and accept the surrender documents, begin the process of dismantling the military they spent years building. Silence becomes its own statement. an acknowledgement that no words can capture this moment. Not everyone accepts the emperor's decision peacefully. As preparations begin for the surrender broadcast, a group of mid-ranking officers launches a desperate coup attempt. They believe the emperor is being manipulated by weak advisors. They plan to seize the imperial palace, stop the broadcast, and continue the war. August 14th. Night falls over Tokyo. The conspirators move through the darkened streets. They reach the palace grounds. They search for the recording of the emperor's surrender announcement. They confront palace guards. Chaos erupts, shots fired, officers shouting conflicting orders, but the coup fails. Senior commanders remain loyal to the emperor's decision. The recording stays hidden. The conspirators find themselves isolated. By dawn, the attempt collapses. Some flee, others are arrested. The surrender will proceed as ordered. Yet the coup attempt reveals the depth of resistance. How completely some officers reject surrender. How impossible they find the idea of laying down arms. For them, death becomes preferable to dishonor. War Minister Anami makes his choice on the night of August 14th. He dresses carefully in traditional clothing, writes a final letter apologizing for failing to secure victory. Then he performs seppuku, ritual suicide. The blade cuts deep. He dies slowly, refusing assistance, accepting the pain as his final duty. His death symbolizes the passing of the old military order, the warrior code taken to its ultimate conclusion. Vice Admiral Onishi follows a similar path. He led the kamikaze program, sent thousands of young pilots to die in suicide attacks. Now Japan surrenders anyway. He cannot live with that outcome. His final letter pleads for Japan to preserve its spirit even in defeat. Then he takes his own life. No assistance, no quick death. Hours of suffering before the end comes. Other senior officers choose death in the following days, each for their own reasons, each unable to accept the new reality. Their suicides shock some, seem inevitable to others. The old Japan, dying literally as well as figuratively. The survivors begin the work of peace, preparing surrender documents, arranging for occupation forces, dismantling military installations. The work feels surreal. Officers who planned invasions now plan capitulation. Generals who commanded armies now command nothing. Hiroshima's vanishing did more than end a war. It ended an entire era, the era of believing conventional military power could determine national fate. The era of assuming technology progressed slowly enough to adapt. The era of thinking geography and determination could protect against any threat. All of that disappeared with Hiroshima, vaporized in the same flash that erased the city. The High Command's journey from disbelief to acceptance mirrors Japan's journey. First denial, then shock, then desperate attempts to find alternatives, finally, painful recognition that no alternatives exist. Reality imposes itself regardless of what anyone wants to believe. A week after the emperor's decision, a young staff officer walks through the now quiet war room. Maps still cover the walls, including one of Hiroshima, or what used to be Hiroshima. The city marked with red circles showing the blast radius, the perfect circle of destruction. He stops and stares at it. He says quietly, to no one in particular, a city disappeared, and with it, the old Japan. The statement captures everything: the physical destruction of Hiroshima, the death of imperial militarism, the end of Japan's vision of itself as an unconquerable island fortress. All gone in a flash, brighter than the sun. When the High Command realized Hiroshima had vanished, they said many things. They argued, they debated, they raged, they pleaded, they calculated, they theorized, they denied, they accepted, they wept, but in the end, only one voice mattered. Only one voice could break the deadlock and force the decision no one wanted to make. The emperor spoke softly about bearing the unbearable, about enduring what cannot be endured, about choosing survival over honor when both options feel impossible. And when that voice finished speaking, the High Command fell silent. Because there was nothing left to say. Hiroshima had vanished, Nagasaki had followed, the atomic age had begun, and Japan's only choice was to accept reality or cease to exist. They chose existence, barely, reluctantly, some choosing death rather than acceptance. But enough chose life that the nation survived. The old Japan died with Hiroshima. What emerged from the ashes would be something different. something shaped by the knowledge that cities can vanish in an instant, that warfare has fundamentally changed, that survival sometimes requires abandoning everything you believed to preserve what truly matters. When they realized Hiroshima had vanished, they said many things, but in the end, only the emperor's voice remained.